Yeah, because at this point, they'd screwed the pooch tremendously. Has this been a serious allegation the entire time? It's not clear, and there's reasons to doubt it, in my opinion.
So I did ask for alternative theories. We consider the fact that...
Did you reach out to SaberSpark? Did they reach out to SaberSpark?
The testimonies themselves do delve into a lot of a parasocial crush.
It's not parasocial. It's not, oh my god, it's not parasocial. They talked together. It was just social.
There is the sexual assault allegation. That is the most damaging of all the statements.
Yeah.
But that allegation did not originate from either KP or Bonk or Sophie. When the allegation...
Bro, KP was involved with bringing it to the public. It's not her story, okay? But it's her headline. It's not her story, but it's her headline, dude. What are you talking about? She is one of, if not the main person with getting this accusation to the public. How is it not her allegation? She clearly has some kind of imputation in this. She published it.
Does come from an actual person that actually exists. Let's talk about them. Chapter 2. Old Friends, New Enemies. SaberSpark was not the first person from his camp to make a comment about the situation. This is Casey. She is SaberSpark's editor's wife, and she posted a tweet longer on the 7th of May. Whatever was going on behind the scenes, these two seem to be operating at entirely different frequencies. Because it's this statement here. At the time that this was written, KP may have removed the video, but she did not publicly recant the allegation. Her tweet the following day called SaberSpark's accuser a victim without shielding the language with allegedly. The only thing that I found that could be considered close to a recantation was KP's voice message to the accuser.
That's not a recantation at all. Nowhere in here does she directly kind of... What? Nowhere in here does she say that she doesn't believe in the allegation anymore. This entire message is just about the PR of the situation, not about the facts of the matter.
Was said in private and made afterwards. But beyond that, Casey says some fairly egregious things about the accuser. She states that the accuser has victims, that the accuser committed a crime in her own guest room, and a simple Google search of quote-unquote her name drama could have told you everything that she has done that is of public knowledge.
Yep.
Of course, Casey never reveals what that name is. And that's one of the biggest mysteries of the whole ordeal. Like, if you really think that this person did X, Y, and Z, and you're clearly not caring about the consequences here, since I doubt SaberSpark wanted a statement like this public, why not just out the person?
Wait, what? You're not caring about the implications here? No, you don't want to out a victim of SA. You might say that you doubt it for these reasons, but obviously this person can't say conclusively that it's not true. And so no, it's bad practice, it's bad form, it's in poor taste, it's wrong, I would say, in most of these cases, usually. It's like a faux pas, it's like a bad thing to do, to out the real identity of an accuser, especially when you are on the side of the accused. Making comments like this, putting this information out, I mean, you're revealing as much as they revealed. So, it's a weak statement, sure, but what?
The logical answer is that this is all made up and Casey is talking out of her ass, but like...
What? No, that is not true. MUME does have allegations against her. What? She's a hated, reviled figure in a lot of these spaces because of information about her that's, like, known publicly.
No, the accuser also claims that she used to know Casey, know her enough to go to Disney together in 2014. And for the record, no one I've spoken to seems to know the context of the alleged crime in the guest room either. I could speculate as to why Casey didn't just out the accuser outright, but we're probably never going to know the real reason. What I do know is that this seemed to be the impetus of people looking further into the accuser who wanted to stay anonymous. Brony Fandon't signal boosted every single person who publicly said that they knew the accuser and defended their story. Redditors used this to see who they were all mutually following. Then they went into the past, looking at tweets of not just SaberSpark, but who they thought was the dead ringer. And then they created a Google document and released it publicly. There was also, ironically enough, a Google Dropbox with more information. The information does paint her as crazy, like over-the-top crazy, from small things like working with Animated James or Mondo Pony before their constellations, to much more out-there events, like having an affair with Ryan Drummond, voice of Sonic in several games, not paying Mike Pollock, voice of Eggman, for voice acting work.
Are they not going to say that... and they're not going to talk about how he did the voice when they had... Never
And
mind.
a long-standing feud with a brain cancer survivor named Lizzie. He also seemed to be doing research into who this person actually was. This
Okay.
was in spite of her not talking to an alt the entire time, and actually talking with the Emu Emmy Discord account from the very beginning. To make sure the KP was on the same page with us, we did have several calls with her. We tried to keep her in the loop. The threat that leaked out probably proves that that wasn't the smartest decision on our end. By the way, if Emily is to be believed, Bonk released that without even her permission. As you probably already noticed, a big issue behind the scenes was that everyone seemed to be acting incredibly irrationally, acting on impulse, or not really thinking through their actions.
Yeah, because at this point, they'd screwed the pooch tremendously.
It was enough trying to get to the bottom of things without someone doing something incredibly inadvisable every other day. My team and I had 3 separate talks with Emily, directly about her own controversies. The first was with Lacey Bedhead alone.
Why?
The second was with her, myself, and Phineas. We wanted to get her side of the story on her controversies.
Why? What have her past controversies really got to do with, like, leveling the accusation? I mean, unless there's evidence, maybe you'd want to have a discussion there to kind of, like, see if they're a reputable person. But there are more pressing concerns than whether they shagged the guy who voiced Sonic.
Just us figuring out what the hell was going on, and as the discussion went on, she provided plenty of receipts. It would take an Atlas effort to verify each and every single one of them, but some of them did hold up to immediate scrutiny. Mike Pollock, for instance, wrote a full-on message about his part in this story. The third conversation was a full-on interview, for all of your viewing pleasure, which I will link in the description. If you want to hear Emily's side of the story directly on any and all of her controversies that we know of, go ahead. I do think that it's important for you to see that, but that discussion is 3.5 hours long on something that's technically only tangentially related to the matters at hand. To be as
I'm so glad I did not watch that interview first. Oh my god, that sounds so boring. I do not know if I care.
forward as I can. Most of the interview is directly about the things that Emily Jones herself has been accused of from various, I'll be quite frank, unsavory places. The goal during these interviews wasn't to question or push back on Emily's statements, and so we didn't. We did that in text and behind the scenes, but not while on the record. We did have a sit-down discussion with her about her own controversies. And I mean, to be fair, speaking about pushing back on Emily's statements in this interview, it's like, what am I supposed to say? Emily was talking about her personal experiences. Like, I could say that it's trying to bait sympathy, but I'm not interested in doing that. That's up to your own interpretation. SaberSpark's response was very fact-oriented, and facts can be very easily critiqued. And it's not like I'm letting Emily's statements go through unfiltered and unfocused, because I am going to have plenty of things to say about the written testimony, the initial allegation.
Yeah, but do you kind of ask her for evidence, like, after she says each things, maybe? Or ask if there's any kind of okay, maybe, I don't know.
But I will state up front, I am interested in being as fair as possible to all parties involved. And I will state that I did pick apart SaberSpark's response video on the matter.
Yeah.
You've already seen that. And during this interview, I don't critique or interject or anything like that. So I would keep that in mind, and I would recommend watching Emily's statements with just as much a grain of salt as I had watching SaberSpark's. If something sounds strange or odd, remember that it's fair to feel that way. Do your own research in the end if something does feel strange or odd. Remember,
No, if something feels strange or odd, or if it's like a statement made with basically no evidence and it's a he said, she said, I mean, ultimately, what can you do? It just deserves to be disregarded, no?
though I have a team, our collective knowledge can be surprisingly limited at times. We have at least 2 members whose entire life is Sonic, and yet at the same time, they had never even heard of Emily Jones, who is allegedly infamous within the Sonic community. The goal here is to give all parties a fair shake. Emily, SaberSpark, everyone. And I expect all of you to want to do the same. For the sake of argument, let's pretend that she was bullshitting all of us for 7 hours, and that everything in every dubious documentary is gold standard truth. Terrible things can happen to terrible people.
Yeah.
Crazy shit can happen to crazy people. Of course, when terrible or crazy people tell us stories, we should take them with mountains of salt. But
what about the brain cancer survivor, though?
controversies alone do not mean that the allegation couldn't have happened. However, it would be irresponsible of me to not mention that many of the controversies, true or not, are sex scandals. Maybe I'm naive, but in the direct discussions that I've had with Emily on voice call, she sounded genuine. And for what it's worth, this is not the first time that she's told the story about SaberSpark. She was able to dig up...
Back in 2021? Fucking SaberSpark years ago, flexing his fame on me and wanted some sexy time. Come on, man. Come on, dude. Does this seem like a rape allegation? That happened to me too, and it's annoying. SaberSpark years ago flexed his fame on me and wanted some sexy time, and it was the worst experience. What? SaberSpark? I actually never knew this. I don't think so. Lamau! Come on, dude.
What it's worth, this is not the first time that she's told the story about SaberSpark.
A story. All that seems to be there is he's flexing on her. He wants sex, and he's flexing his YouTube fame to get it. And it was the worst experience. Was it awkward? Was it bad? The person she's speaking to seems to think it's funny. It seems to be this is in a gossipy kind of like tell stories back and forth, not a sear, somber allegation of rape. That seems to be the case. Okay.
To dig up some...
This video could have been half the length. Most of this is, like, irrelevant.
The truth of the matter is that Emily came to KP in late March, a month before Skype was fully deleted. Not that that matters either, since Skype didn't save user-side data prior to 2018. If you didn't have access to the computer where all those messages originated from, you didn't have access to those messages at all. Of course...
The problem is, though, the story is that we'd been led to believe this is a story that she's told kind of concurrently or continuously as a rape allegation, right? And usually, at least in the experience of looking at kind of like how people talk about this in the context of like dramas that I've seen. Obviously, I've never had somebody personally tell me their story of rape, right? Okay. So I have had it a couple times in my personal life. But usually, for what they're talking about, to kind of talk about kind of conversations they've had or kind of creepy, weird conversations, there's been screenshots, there's been details. Usually this is stuff people are sending to each other, right? This is why people take screenshots at the time. They end up being corroborating evidence. They'll usually take those screenshots to kind of like share with friends and to discuss it. But apparently there's none of these screenshots. Which kind of looks like if she's saying this is like a bad experience and talking about him flexing on her and wanting sexy time. Has this been a serious allegation the entire time? It's not clear, and there's reasons to doubt it, in my opinion.
Of course, with what we know now, there are a couple of legitimate questions that do arrive. Why now? And if you have a platform, well, why not do this on your own? After all, Emily's platform is much bigger than KP's. Due to the fact that she's worked directly with Sega and actual established voice actors, you could argue that on some level she's actually more successful than SaberSpark. I can't really answer that question. As for why be anonymous, the reason claimed is that Emily was afraid of SaberSpark's fans and would be afraid of them attacking her. I will say up front, SaberSpark has a reputation for a few things, but sending his fans to attack people is not one of them. The only thing that comes close is when SaberSpark made a harsh and, to be honest, bad critique of Freedom Tunes, but that backfired horrendously on him. The example that Emily gave when directly asked was this Twitter exchange between SaberSpark and KP, the one that KP put in her own video. This is a bad example. Here is how Twitter works if you don't know. Even if you're following someone, you are not sent Twitter replies. You have to go out of your way and specifically seek them out. And if you're not following them at all, as Emily wasn't, the chances of coming across this is slim. It should be noted that one of the things that Emily is accused of is sending her fan base to harass people. Even if that's false, any big YouTuber probably knows that their fan base has a propensity to harass people.
Maybe. Wait 1 second, let me have a look at this. Alright, so that makes sense. So one of the reasons you want to say anonymous is because you're afraid SaberSpark will utilize this fan base. Have you noticed other examples of him doing that? I saw him go after KP publicly, using his image to absolve Gabe. I also know that no matter what, to go against him will cause that to happen. Going after KP publicly? Yes, there was a whole thread. I think it appeared in the recent bad video, but I remember seeing it myself. Okay, you saw it when it originally happened? I did. Were you watching KP prior, or SaberSpark for any reason? No, not really, but I did see a lot of pony drama, sadly. Okay.
Things that Emily is accused of is...
I mean, what is this harassment? The kind of harassment she's worried about is the kind of harassment that KP got after going after Gabe, which is the name of Black Griffin. Okay. This just seems like Twitter replies.
In terms of transparency, I am going to pull the allegations directly from the original KB video. Then afterwards, I'll throw in some updated and more specific information that the accuser later added. It is also worth noting that there are a couple of different versions of this immediately. The one in the video is not identical that was released on the Brony fandom Twitter and Blue Sky. With that being said, let's give all the parties the benefit of the doubt while we can. I will be calling the separate alleged crimes Incidents 1 and 2 for simplicity's sake. Incident 1 is said to have taken place in late September during Canterlot Gardens in Strongville, Ohio. Incident 2 was first said to have taken place in 2013, but was later corrected to EQLA 2012 in Anaheim, California. I get that changing information at all can be taken as a sign that something is amiss. But once again, let's give the benefit of the doubt while we can, keeping in mind that all of this allegedly took place over 10 years ago.
Well, it's benefit of the doubt. What benefit of the doubt to say that it's true? What? I mean, I understand being, like, somewhat charitable, but no, it does stand that if a correction needs to be made later, after these kind of allegations are initially workshopped, seems to be that they realised that they got the dates wrong after going to check and start looking for evidence to kind of substantiate it after a little bit of kind of, like, backlash faced by KP. No, I think it's probably fair that that receives backlash. Or at the very fact that, like, the dates have to change, they realise that they misremembered. It does add to the fact that, have they actually been telling the story? Or has this been, you know, something that they haven't really thought about until now?
Speaking of which, I must all remind you that these are allegations, and all parties should be presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
I completely disagree, okay? I want to go one step further than this guy, okay? You are presumed criminally innocent unless you are proven guilty in a court of law, okay? There we are. In the court of public opinion, and in your own personal kind of opinion, you can say you think that somebody did do something, okay? It's like, well, you know, there is a lot of evidence. There is a lot of evidence to say they did do that thing, but, like, I don't know. They haven't been gone to court. No, you do not need a court of law to come to your own personal opinion about what has happened in an event.
Before we continue, we need to discuss how these allegations were made. They were put together and constructed on Discord before they made it into the video, Twitter, and the Google document. KP and Courtney Pete gave direct feedback to the accuser. A lot of this is innocuous, asking for clarifying details, editing for flow, but there was a segment that they thought should have been removed entirely.
Okay, now to be clear, this is something that, I don't know, it probably hasn't made the rounds. Should I have tweeted it out? Who knows, okay? Have they reached out to Courtney Pete for comment? I wonder if they have. Courtney Pete directly refutes this. Or directly denies this, okay? And there doesn't seem to be any kind of, to be clear, it's not true that Courtney Pete directly gave feedback to the victim. So far as I can see, okay, the screenshots prove that ilovekimpossiblealot sent over the testimony and said, what do you think? And then Courtney Pete gave her thoughts, and that got sent over. Did she know that that was going to be sent back to the victim? Courtney Pete denies it. KP says that, yes, she did know. It's a he said, she said. Or she said, she said. It's disputed, okay? But to say that Courtney Pete directly gave feedback to the victim isn't true, or at least isn't evidenced.
The issue of implied consent, and even giving SaberSpark the benefit of the doubt that there was a possibility SaberSpark felt that...
Also, I mean, if this was just him making this video on his own, fair play. But he seems to hold himself to quite high regards, so maybe that should add an allegedly.
consent was implied. Courtney and Rachel recommended that part be removed, considering that Rachel thinks the idea of implied consent is quote-unquote kind of BS. As you might remember, the entire video has a whole segment on implied consent. More on this later. I'll be blunt, we won't be talking about Incident 1 very much. It was a smaller convention in general, and doesn't seem to have been well documented. The only footage that we can find was of panels and interviews, things that would have gone around in fandom circuits at the time. Here's what we can prove. Both SaberSpark and Emily were at this convention, at least on the 27th. SaberSpark shared a hotel. Emily were at this convention, at least on the 27th. SaberSpark shared a hotel room with at least Paleosteno, a frequent collaborator. SaberSpark was also doing coverage at times. Emily and SaberSpark have a Twitter interaction late in the morning. At some point, he hosts a panel with Everfree Radio and tweets about it later that night. The sexual assault is alleged to have happened on this day, and there is a ton of time that's not accounted for. But that just means that it's technically possible to have happened. Just because time is unaccounted for doesn't mean that it did happen. On day 3 of this convention, SaberSpark tweeted about dining with the Creepers, Mondo Pony, and the Everfree Radio staff. After the incident, the accuser alleges trying to go to the room they were supposed to be staying at. However, they were staying with a couple, but there was allegedly a domestic violence incident, so they felt the need to leave. This incident...
What?
Radio staff. After the incident, the accuser alleges trying to go to the room they were supposed to be staying at. However, they were staying with a couple, but there was allegedly a domestic violence incident.
Okay. For Camelot, somebody in the fandom drove from my house to the venue 2 hours away. I remember being really happy and excited and meeting people until after the opening ceremonies. I saw Saber. After opening ceremonies, Saber texted me to come up to his room. After I left, I immediately called my best friend, panicking. After I left his room. I immediately called my best friend, panicking and crying, and tried to walk down to the room I was supposed to be staying at. I witnessed the act of domestic violence, freaked out even more, then paced around the hotel until outside. Huh?
So they felt the need to leave. This incident doesn't seem to have been reported to the police. At the very least, it doesn't seem to have been in fandom news or local news of the area. It is also worth noting that no police were ever contacted in regards to any of the alleged crimes at any point. That being said, it is worth noting that brony fan conventions had notoriously bad security. Toon Critic, an infamous former analyst who had been accused of engaging in erotic roleplay with a minor for over a year, among other crimes, was allegedly able to get away with a lot of his shady behavior in plain sight at many of these conventions. As late as 2019, when people should have been on much higher alert, a security staff at a brony convention was even outed as a predator. Emily attests to having circled around the outside of the hotel on a Skype call with their best friend and wanting to come home. They didn't because they alleged having very strict parents, and didn't want to be banned from cons forever. After this, according to them, they remained in the lobby for the rest of the night, remembering.
Why are we talking about this? Who is even alleged to have committed this act of domestic abuse? Why are we talking about this?
Even sleeping there. Emily did post a picture of the convention the next day. It should be noted that Emily posted to social media at both events after the incidents were said to have happened. But that's really what we have for hard data here and full-on testimony. Let's go over some of the more inference-based things. Okay. In the testimony, quote-unquote, the first time interacting with any sort of celebrity is technically inaccurate. Emily has been on Dr. Phil in an episode that was aired in 2011. Now, I can easily see why Dr. Phil would not be immediately thought of as a celebrity. And if you ask many people, especially young people who have been on Dr. Phil, they describe it as particularly traumatic. The Dr. Phil experience...
Yes, going on Dr. Phil is not having a personal correspondence with a celebrity. It's not the same.
Is a whole wormhole of controversies in and of itself that we don't have time to get into. He is a man accused of not having a therapy license, and yet acting like one on TV, focusing more on entertainment than the health of the people he interacts with. But he is, by definition, a celebrity. The other odd thing here is being starstruck. Emily also repeatedly claimed that SaberSpark kept saying that the two of them even dating would be wrong. So, let's talk about where SaberSpark stood in 2012. He was not-
Whoa. You're assuming that statement that you do not have evidence for is relating to, like, this power dynamic or this fan thing or whatever. We've got no reason. Well, you might say there's reason to believe that he's saying that allegedly in relation to the power difference between them. But it could very well be that that is her characterization of how he meant it. There's nothing kind of in the text or in the quotation to say that that's what he's talking about.
Not the super mega ultra YouTuber that he is now. He didn't have 2 million subscribers at least. Even in the brony analyst circuit, he was not at the top of the hill. I would have thought about DigiBrony, Josh Scorcher, honestly even his longtime friend Paleosteno, before I thought of SaberSpark. That being said, SaberSpark was not a no one at the time either. I mentioned Everfree Radio a couple of times already. Paleosteno and SaberSpark were a part of this collective, and had associations with DustyCat and AC RaceBest. AC created Bronies React, which was incredibly successful in its heyday, so SaberSpark wasn't a no one. I mean, he was a part of this whole panel in Canterlot Gardens. It is also worth mentioning that Brony fame, or horse fame as it was called, worked a little bit differently than general internet whatevers. People did flock to even smaller individuals, and it didn't take a lot to get wildly successful within the community. I myself practically did Wikipedia-style recaps of episodes, and even I got a degree of horse fame. On the other hand, we have to consider the time period. This allegedly took place in 2012, and in the previous 13 years, our cultural attitudes have changed a lot. These days, there's a ton of argument and debate about when it's okay for any kind of celebrity or even a YouTuber to do things with their fans, date them, engage in sexual behavior, so on. Back in 2012, it would have been at least strange for SaberSpark to be concerned about power dynamics. This discussion really became mainstream in the wake of Me Too later in the decade. In 2012, with very few exceptions, being a YouTuber wasn't even a real job to the wider public. To be fair, Emily says that it wasn't her saying it would have been wrong for the two of them to date. It was allegedly SaberSpark saying that.
Why?
Yes. So I did ask for alternative theories. We considered the fact that...
Did you reach out to SaberSpark? Did they reach out to SaberSpark? At all?
Maybe it was an affair, but it didn't seem like SaberSpark was dating.
Huh? I had to answer this. To the day, I'm still not sure what he meant. To this day, I'm still not sure what he meant. Okay, that's the end of the line of inquiry then, right? I could only guess it was maybe because I was a fan, or maybe because I did just graduate high school, and maybe he was concerned about an age difference. Maybe because you lived in a different state. Maybe because you didn't really know each other. Maybe because you had other stuff going on. Maybe because you just didn't want to date anybody.
Anyone at the time. At the very least, we couldn't find any information that he was. Emily herself suggested that maybe it was because of the age gap, but at no point was she ever accusing that SaberSpark thought that she was under the age of 18 or anything like that. SaberSpark was 24 at the time and she was 18, and that is a significant age gap. But once again, considering the time period, I don't know how taboo anyone would have felt dating an 18-year-old just in general. I am also aware that a lot of people speculate that Emily might be bitter that a previous relationship didn't work out, and that might be why she's doing this. The testimonies themselves do delve into a lot of a parasocial crush, and the possibility...
It's not parasocial. It's not... Oh my god. Oh my god. It's not parasocial. They talk together. It's just social. It's just social at that point. She had a crush. They had DM'd. Apparently, even according to the statement, okay, I'm willing to be raped if this is wrong. She had only watched his videos for 6 months or so before even speaking to him. And at that point, their social relationship dwarfed their parasocial relationship. It's just social. It's just social.
That she wishes things turned out differently than they did. By her own admission, she believes that consent may have been implied because of said crush. Now, people can be sexually assaulted by someone that they have a crush on. They can be taken to a place that they are not comfortable with. And I will also state this, because I think this is relevant to this argument. Emily currently has a partner that she does seem very comfortable with. That doesn't make this point of view impossible, I just personally think it makes it less likely. No matter which way you slice Incident 1, it's going to be a he said, she said story. It allegedly took place in a hotel room with no witnesses.
I don't get that point about having a current partner, what?
Delve into a lot of a parasocial crush, and the possibility that she wishes things turned out differently than they did. By her own admission, she believes that consent may have been implied because of said crush. Now, people can be sexually...
Wait, no, those are two different points. Those are two different points. One of them is that the only reason why this is coming out is because of the bitterness at a relationship not happening. And then she herself has admitted that consent may have been implied by the fact that she had a crush.
Assaulted by someone that they have a crush on.
Yeah.
They can be taken to a place that they are not comfortable with. And I will also state this, because I think this is relevant to this argument. Emily currently has a partner that she does seem very comfortable with. That doesn't
Well, how does that have any bearing at all on any of this?
to make this point of view impossible. I just personally think it makes it less likely. No matter which way you slice Incident 1, it's going to be a he said, she said story.
Oh, so Noz, okay. So the point is, she's now in a happy relationship, but is coming for a man she was involved with 10 years ago out of bitterness. Well, that might be the reason why she felt so jaded afterwards, right? It seems like he's very, very clear that he doesn't want a relationship. Even up to it and including that. But it feels like she felt used for sex afterwards because he didn't have a relationship. That's where that's coming from, right? That's kind of tainted her whole idea of it at the time. Not that she is still, like, pining after him, but she felt as though she was, like, fucked about with.
It allegedly took place in a hotel room with no witnesses. And while there are certainly things that you can question, certain statements that sound odd, there are no outward contradictions. And one of those questions that we should probably nip in the bud immediately is, why don't you just go to the police? After 2020, I think that some people do understand the view of being hesitant to go to the police a little bit more. But to start with, some people are just very uncomfortable with police officers in general, and in many cases justifiably so. But the best way I can describe it is like this. After something traumatic happens, the last thing on many people's minds is trying to prove it. And sometimes, even in the instant, you can't prove it. If someone runs over your dog, would your first inclination be to try and write down the license plate number?
No, but my first inclination would also not be going to a YouTuber. This is such a stupid argument. Are people obligated to go to the police? No. But arguing it to this degree is just, like, ridiculous. It is just ridiculous. I think that it should be a good standard, and I do give charity to people when they've taken the step to go to the police. Is it an indictment that somebody hasn't gone to the police? Not necessarily. But is it beneficial to their case if they have gone and lodged a police report? Yeah.
Number of the car that hit it. That being said, going to the police after something terrible happens is, generally speaking, the correct course of action. To be forward with you, if this is where the story ended, I probably wouldn't be making this video at all. There's not much a YouTuber can do with a he said, she said story that's not their own. At the very least, it's a very big risk to handle at all. But the big issue is that people are going to have their own immediate biases, and you can't really shake them away. You know, you've got the believe all victims crowd versus the I want to see the goddamn footage before I believe you crowd. But we do have one more incident to look over, and luckily for us, there's actually more stuff to look over with that one. Chapter 4. The second incident. Early November, EQLA 2012. Once again, I'm going to be pulling the allegation directly from the KP video. I will state ahead of time, once again, the date in the original allegation is wrong. Emily later updated this to have occurred at the very start of November in 2012. I will also state again that these are allegations, and all parties are to be presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
I maintained the friendship until a second occurrence happening at a completely different PonyCon in 2013. This time we met in a public space, but had no one around and talked for a while. He kept bringing up the prospects of us starting a relationship, but how it felt wrong. He would grab my hand saying how it felt so right, only to push my hand away saying, but so wrong. I had decided that my crush on him was something I needed to get over because I felt that my emotions were being toyed with. He then suggested going to a more public space around others, and we went into the elevator to go up to the lobby of the PonyCon hotel. As soon as the door closed, SaberSpark forcefully shoved me against the wall and shoved his tongue down my throat. It scared me and actually hurt, triggering another attack of dissociation. Once again, he did not ask for consent when throwing me into this situation. Once the doors opened and people were present, this led me to feel very embarrassed. He got off me and took my hand and guided me towards the stairs to go back down to where we just were and into a men's restroom where he pulled his pants down and guided my hands and head to perform oral sex on him. I was afraid of denying him because of past experiences with sexual assault, so I did it to get it over with without wanting to cause a problem, where he would ejaculate on my face, apologize profusely, and then offer the same handshake as he did at the con I initially met him, saying, "Friends?" Despite pretending I was fine, I had slowly begun pulling away from SaberSpark. I cried that night while staying with a friend, but waited for that friend to fall asleep so no one could hear me, and I would cry for months, feeling ashamed of myself for putting myself in a compromising situation with someone I hardly knew. I had always felt taken advantage of by him, and tried being friendly and pretending nothing was wrong because it was all I knew how to do. I would blame myself for the interactions for years, only opening up to a few close people, questioning if consent was implied because of my crush, and unwillingness and fear to outright stop the advances because of how uncomfortable I felt. I understand that there is a possibility that he felt consent was implied because he knew I had a crush on him. However, he did not once ask for consent directly and was instead thrown into these sexual encounters, usually very suddenly. There were no discussions about the power dynamic between us as a popular content creator and a fan at any time. In my parasocial connection to him and
Why am I smiling? What's funny? Okay. The reason why I'm smiling is, though, obviously, this sounds very, very horrific. And if this is true, this could be a number of things, ranging from sexual assault, kind of to more minor things like being a fuckboy and kind of, you know, being sexually aggressive, let's say, and a sexually aggressive fuckboy, okay? And being kind of ambivalent to how your sexual partner might feel with this, okay? But the friend thing and the handshake, I can't help it. It just makes me laugh every time. Okay. Let's go on. Also, the problem is throughout the entire telling of this story, there's no time when she ever says, like, no, thank you. I don't want to do this. I kind of feel uncomfortable. Or just say something to indicate that she's not happy with the situation going on. Which, I don't know, it's just, man.
People have noticed is that Emily has said the second attack allegedly happened on the 2nd, the day before the convention proper. However, both parties did arrive early. So, let's talk about the 2nd. We will go through this day beat by beat with what information we have. The hotel was apparently the Anaheim Hilton, which provided discounts to the con-goers. It was also basically across the street from the local Disney park, and that's where SaberSpark and company spent most of their day.
On the list of bad ideas, here comes the first one, setting up my camera. This camera's not gonna stay. It's not gonna stay. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Friday! The Friday before Equestria LA. One day, less than 24 hours before the convention begins.
AC Racebest drives the place alone and meets SaberSpark there. This is sometime after 4:45 p.m.
Traffic! Well, not too bad. It's 4:46, and things have actually been moving pretty good on this freeway so far, so...
Now, at a point, SaberSpark mentions that his cell phone dies.
Saber, your phone died? Yes. Why would it do that?
Plugged it in last night.
Oh.
It only charged for like 30
He tweets again later that night. Now, this kind of breaks the timeline a bit, but I do think that we need to skip forward a little and establish something immediately, because this thing threw everyone off. SaberSpark's tweet here looks like it was made at November 3rd, at almost 1 in the morning. Now, Emily alleged that the incident happened after 10 p.m., like shortly after 10 p.m. And she alleged that SaberSpark texted her to get her to go down into the hotel's basement. Now, that is a wild time discrepancy of 3 hours where SaberSpark's cell phone was apparently dead. This is what KP is referring to when she says this, by the way.
None of like the things that have been pointed out to me doesn't make any sense.
Right.
The timeline is questionable.
And I'll admit that at this time, we had at least heard some version of Emily's controversies, and with this apparent discrepancy, it was not looking good for her. However, Phineas let us all in on something that we all should have figured out a lot.
Bro, you didn't even think to account for the time zones. Okay. Okay, fucking hell.
Sooner. Time zones, you idiots. The time that a tweet is posted
Maybe it's just because
shows
I'm
your local
maybe
time.
it's just because I'm an Angloid, okay? And I always have to account for time zones when I'm kind of looking at American stuff. Okay, maybe. As a downtrodden minority, okay, over the pond. Maybe that's why. Okay.
Time.
Maybe
not
that's not
the
retarded.
local time of the sender. So I went into my computer settings, changed it to Anaheim's local time, Pacific United States, and look at that, SaberSpark sent this tweet out at 9:59 p.m. His time, November 2nd. This doesn't automatically mean that Emily's allegation is true. The only thing that it means is that there is no obvious contradiction when Emily says that SaberSpark texted her, because at 10 p.m., his phone was charged, and he was tweeting. I also must let it be known that Emily did not change her story when confronted on this mistaken discrepancy. She did not change her story, even when we were telling her that the story was likely impossible. Everything else that happens at Disney isn't important at the moment. SaberSpark and AC carpool together as they drive away, and luckily for us, the camera does occasionally hit the car's clock. The problem is that it's shitty 2012 handcam by someone just casually recording at night. Here's the best quality images that we were able to get. We believe that this is roughly 9:20 and we asked a dozen people. However, if you don't agree with us,
it looks like it.
I don't blame you. Another thing of note, we don't exactly see people eating here, which means that this was likely a very confusing cut where AC Race Best jumped forward in time with a lot of missing context. So, where does all of this leave us? It means that as far as I can tell, SaberSpark was filmed up to about 10 p.m., but if he was filmed after that, AC Race Best didn't put it in the vlog, which I gotta say is quite frustrating. But what does it mean for real? It means, at the very least, with what we have publicly available, it is not impossible for things to have occurred the way that Emily does describe them. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that it happened, just that, with what we know, it's not impossible. Remember, the incident allegedly happened at the hotel. It allegedly started in the elevator and allegedly ended in a men's public restroom in the basement. Once again, areas that don't really have cameras. With the publicly available evidence, it's not impossible. That doesn't mean that it happened, it just means that it could have possibly happened. And I keep saying the publicly available answer because there is always the possibility that either the parties are withholding things. I can also say that Emily Jones is a real person who at the very least does have something to lose if she was a proven liar. Regardless of the initial anonymity, she's out in the open now. She's not the figment of the imaginations of Brony Fandot and KP. Remember, SaberSpark spent much of his own response video talking about Brony Fandot and KP. Like, he didn't bring up any of this timeline stuff.
Well, no. What? Yeah, his okay. Fair play. He talks about KP. He talks about Brony Fandot because these are the people going after him, trying to take down his reputation. Yeah, he doesn't talk about the timeline because realistically, she doesn't really seem to give much of a timeline. Okay, the details that she gave in her initial statement are very kind of bare bones. In fact, as by your own admission, the date was wrong that she got. Okay, so no, he just refutes it and says it's not true. Does he have to go through and give his side of the story? I don't know if he has to. It would have been good to. And it was disappointing that his response was bare bones, though. Yeah.